welcome everybody to another edition of the Black Agenda Podcast Live. It's our weekly roundup number 4, and we are happy to be back with you to bring you all the news from the past week, including some news you didn't hear about, maybe some stuff you did hear about. And so we're happy to be back with our normally scheduled weekly roundup. We appreciate you tuning in last week. If you did get to see our Super Bowl special, where we did get to see Adrian walk away with being the only person to predict the Super Bowl correctly, at least the Super Bowl winner, and he predicted the score that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers actually had, which was 31 points. And so, yeah, we had a great time with our panel last week, and congratulations to Adrian there for picking that correctly. And so, yeah, we're happy to be back. We got a lot of news to get to. And so, again, this is our weekly roundup number 4. And so let's get right into it. And so, off the top, the first thing we want to talk about is COVID stimulus. And so we know that, they're working on a $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill that they are trying to push through the Senate and the House and get money into people's hands. And so, Adrian, we're looking at possibility of a $1,400 check arriving at people's doorsteps or virtually through your bank. And so right now, the bill is working its way through Congress. They're expecting a vote in the House on February 22nd, but President Biden's continually, meeting with people on Capitol Hill, still trying to work with Republicans, but more than likely, their stimulus bill is going to be passed through what they call budget reconciliation, where it's just a simple majority vote. Vice President, Kamala Harris is going to be the tie-breaking vote to get the bill through the Senate. So it will pass. It's just how it's going to look and what's going to be included in it. And Adrian, we were talking about these stimulus checks. We know that, it's been tough over there in the world of sales. Everything is totally thrown off. And so, we were talking if you were going to get a stimulus check, because I did get the $600 one. And so they're talking about lowering the income limit for those who can get this next round of stimulus. And so I don't know, maybe we'll qualify, but there are people out there who question whether some people actually deserve a stimulus check. In particular, Senator Joe Manchin, who wants to see the struggle. He wants to see proof of it before he can send out a $1,400 stimulus check to people. So what's your thoughts on that?
I wish I could invite Joe Manchin to come to LA, and he can come up to my studio and we can have a little honest conversation about the struggle. Because it's real. I mean, it's real. I mean, I get the fact that 75,000 sounds like a lot on paper, but when you live in Los Angeles versus living in Eupora, Mississippi, which is where I'm from, I mean that 75,000 it stretches a lot further in Eupora than it does Absolutely. Over here. Over here, you're basically minimum wage and paycheck to paycheck kind of living, because the cost of living is so much higher. I mean, you even have to take into consideration that California has state taxes, Devin, where you are in Texas, you don't even pay a state tax. I used to live in Tennessee. I didn't pay state taxes. So, I mean, I'm already seeing anywhere from about maybe 25 to 30% of income just in federal and state taxes before I even begin to pay bills. So, yeah, that struggle is definitely out there, Joe Manchin. You just need to maybe get outside of your bubble and begin to do a little research. And then the other thing, Devin, is that they're really basing this off of the 2019 tax returns, where, obviously most people haven't filed for 2020. But if you looked at 2020, I think, Devin, that would paint a clearer and a better picture for you of the struggle of Americans, because throughout 2020 is when Americans were going through a pandemic. Throughout 2020 is when Americans lost their jobs, had to go in food lines. So the struggle is definitely out there. So I'm hopeful, Devin, to see stimulus for a majority of Americans. I get if you think that there shouldn't be, like I said, there are people who are really, really struggling to kind of make ends meet. And Devin, whenever you look at the fact that another piece of that stimulus package is the minimum wage, think about it. I mean, if you're somebody who you're getting paid $7.25 an hour, I mean, you're pretty much living in poverty. I mean, I don't care what state you're living in, you're still living in poverty. I mean, I don't know where you could really get by on, less than $20,000 a year if you've got maybe a child or two, and maybe you've got a spouse or something like that. You can't do that. So the discussion that we're having about raising the federal minimum wage to say $15 an hour, it is a valid discussion. I don't know, Devin, how feasible it's going to be when you've got nonpartisan committees like the Congressional Budget Office coming out with reports saying a $15 minimum wage would help 17 million Americans, but also cost 1.4 million Americans their job. It's a thing that you really got to sell. Not to mention the fact that a lot of businesses can't afford to pay $15, Devin.
That right there, that last statement is what's going to probably be the stumbling block to this. I think it's not a bad argument. I mean, there are small businesses out there, small mom and pop shops that cannot afford. They just can't afford $15, but maybe they could do 10. Maybe they could do 11, 12. I mean, it doesn't have to be a hard wage at $15. And if you don't believe us, we can look at this map here showing you what the federal minimum or what the minimum wage is in different states around the country. So, for the people who are, worried about the price of a hamburger going up because the minimum wage is going to be higher, well, more than likely you live in a state where the minimum wage is already higher than $7.25. I mean, California, where you say, Adrian, is 13. The state of Washington, theirs is 13. New York, I think, is $12.50. I mean, you look around, it kind of bounces around, but most states are not at $7.25, but until you get to the South, where Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, all of them where the black people live, $7.25 is the bottom, the least amount. I mean, even Florida voted to up their minimum wage. Like, that's how you know this is really it's a need, and voters and people are starting to understand that it's just not feasible, like you say, to live off $20,000 a year. $7.25 is just, that's not going to cut it anywhere in this country, because rent continues to go up, utilities, cell phones, car insurance, the car payments are larger than they've ever been, and the car loans are larger than they've ever been. So that's eating into the money that's available for these people, or for folks who may be working for wages that low. So it is very hard out there. So I'm for maybe more of a staggered wage or something that factors in, like you say, the cost of living in different states. $15 in Mississippi can get you a lot longer than $15 in California or New York or even Texas. I mean, Texas really should probably be at $15. I don't see why we couldn't do that. I think there has to be a discussion around it. It needs to be higher, but maybe we could phase it in slowly over time, base it on consumer prices. I'm not sure, but there are different ways that we can go about it than just a blanket, $15 minimum wage hike. I don't think that's the best way, and the Congressional Budget Office has told us there's some drawbacks to doing that. But the conversation needs to be had. It's here. It's going to happen. It just depends on how it looks going forward. So it's interesting. I'm glad we're here, though. The Democrats have control of the House, so it's probably going to happen. So I'm just glad we're at least here.
Yeah, I'm glad we're here too. It's definitely something that needs to happen. I second, everything you said. It would be tough on some of those small, mom and pop shops to do that. But you've got, some corporations like Walmart who don't pay their employees what they should, yet they rake in billions of dollars every year. Yes. So it's definitely something that we should talk about.
Off the government too.
Yeah, off the government, because a lot of their employees are getting food stamps and different things like that. And then the other thing, Devin, that you really have to think about is this is only kind of scratching the surface. Yes, we need to raise the minimum wage, but there are other underlying levers, so to speak, that the government could utilize to affect this. Obviously, if you can't have states in Mississippi, or rather businesses in Mississippi, paying $15 an hour. Well, what if you reduce grocery taxes? What if you help with childcare costs for people who live in Mississippi? There's different ways that you can lower the cost of living so that wages can actually go a little bit further. The other thing that you may want to look into, Devin, as a country, is maybe job training. Maybe we need to look at education. If you're saying that we've got too many people on minimum wage and we can't take it up to 15. Maybe we need to figure out how we can re-educate these people to move them on to solar jobs or jobs, in manufacturing or something like that, something that's not a minimum wage job. I think, Devin, that this is a great debate, but unfortunately, our government just likes headlines and likes hot topics. They don't like real solutions. So this is just something that's more or less a progressive issue that people like Senator Sanders and Warren have talked about so much. And they're just trying to say, all right, Democrats, now that we've got control of the government, let's just raise a bunch of hype about this. But I'm going to really hold Democrats to the fire, Devin, and say if they're really about the people, if they're really about the middle and low class, let's see more than just the $15 minimum wage, because honestly, I don't believe that it's going to be feasible for most states.
No, it's not. And hopefully this is a serious attempt. I don't know if it's going to make it through the Senate. The Senate actually just passed the resolution prohibiting the increase of the federal minimum wage. So that's another hurdle to try to get over. So it's going to battle me to kind of take $1 has been like the standard. We've heard that for like the last 10 years as far as what the minimum wage needs to be. And so we wanted to make sure we talked about that. And so the other thing, in addition, like we said, we talked about the stimulus bill, but we kind of wanted to bring your attention to something that Dave Ramsey said. Everybody knows who Dave Ramsey is, financial guru, but he was recently on Fox, and they asked him about, what he thought about giving stimulus checks to people. And so he had an interesting comment that I don't know if I necessarily agree with. And so let's show you the clip here and tell you what he said. Give me 1 second. Let's see.
Well, to start with, we need to understand we got $1.7 trillion. So
that's him talking about
student
loans, but the real part is right here.
I don't believe in a stimulus check, because if $600 or $1,400 changes your life, you were pretty much screwed already. You got other issues going on. You have a career problem, you have a debt problem, you have a relationship problem, you have a mental health problem.
Adrian,
something else is going on. If $600,
he says if a $600 or $1,400 check is going to change your life, then you were pretty much screwed already. From somebody who's a millionaire and whose financial advice involves people putting together a $1,000 emergency fund, then I would think that financial guru would be okay with the government sending people a $1,400 check. I mean, that could be their emergency fund so that their life doesn't change at some point. But, it just came off as very shrewd, and this sort of talking down to people of like, well, you were screwed to begin with, so we don't need to help you. You were already, the ship has sailed on you. People who need the $600 or $1,400, we don't need to help you anymore. But if that was the reverse, where was Dave Ramsey in 2018 when they were passing his tax cuts? These businesses don't need a tax cut. The people who were making millions of dollars didn't need a tax cut. But did you hear Dave Ramsey saying, oh, well, if you need a tax cut, you were screwed already then? Like, come on. Like, it's ridiculous. Only regular, average American people get that type of talk from people who claim to be financial gurus. Whenever the government does something for corporate America or big business and millionaires, you don't hear this kind of crap. Well, whenever it's something for just regular, everyday people who actually need it, all of a sudden we're freeloaders and we were, bad at finances and we're screwed already, so we don't need help anymore. It's just like, I don't understand it. I really don't get it.
Devin, I'm with you. He had some interesting points, and I mean, as someone who works in finance, I can find somewhat some nuggets or some merit in some of the things he said, but it's how you go about saying them. I mean, yeah, he mentioned the fact that a lot of people have underlying issues like debt. Maybe they need to make a career change. Maybe their relationship is draining them. Maybe they even have a mental illness that they're not, dealing with. And I mean, yeah, you're fair to say all of those sorts of things, but I think where a lot of financial gurus, in particular someone like Dave Ramsey, who has been doing this for a while, he said he was bankrupt, but the thing is, he's not bankrupt anymore. I mean, he's a multi-millionaire. He's got a lot of following. So to say that, it's almost like you forget where you come from almost, because a lot of people who who need this $1,400 is like you said, Devin. Some people lost their jobs. I mean, clearly they could have had emergency money, but if you lose your job, you don't have any income to keep you sustained. If you lose your job, you can't continue putting money in Bitcoin or investing in rental property because you don't have an income.
Yes.
People just miss out on that. And you miss out on the fact that here in America, it's not like everybody started on the same playing field. If you were Black or Latino or Asian or maybe Muslim, or maybe if you were white, you probably started on a different level. Your credit probably started, piss poor if you were someone who's of color versus if you were someone in the majority class. So I think whenever you have people like Dave Ramsey say things like this, and, maybe Dave and his team will listen to us. Not to say that we don't like Dave, because we actually have one of his representatives that will come on our podcast later. But what we're saying, and talk to the American people. What we're saying is this is how you educate the American people on their issues. Yeah, you can say, Joe, whoever you're talking to, yeah, this $1,400, you should, use it. But on the side, maybe you should consider reconciling your debt or paying off some of your credit card bills. I mean, you can say both sides of the coin, but you got to do it the right way, because, this guy's coming from someone who is not really struggling right now versus me. Heck, I could use, $1,400 right now. I'm not going to lie to you at all. I mean, that could go a lot.
Who have lost their jobs and who are actually struggling. They're not making it up. Like I say, every week we're seeing 700, 800,000 people filing unemployment claims for the very first time. Mm-hmm. That is not made up. That is not people who need a $600 or $1,400 check to save their life. Those are people who are struggling at no fault.
Those are people who are probably embarrassed to do that, because a lot of these people have never had to do governmental assistance. A lot of people feel like there's a stigma whenever they have to rely on the government
because of people like Dave Ramsey.
Yeah, it's not like people just want. I don't want to have to depend on a check to be wired for me from the Department of the Treasury. But hell, times are hard. I could use a little bit of relief.
I was one of those people. I had never in my life ever used unemployment until last October. And that had nothing to do with my job performance. It was simply the virus and what it had done to the bottom line of the business. And they could not keep me. And I had to go and file unemployment. I had never done that before. But like you say, there isn't a stigma to it. So you don't tell people, oh, yeah, I'm on unemployment, because then people start judging you all of a sudden as if they're somehow better. Like, no, I didn't do anything wrong. The pandemic happened because the president ignored it. Like, we got here because the administration ignored it. And so the idea that you're going to sit there and talk down to people because they're struggling and the government decided to step in and give them money to see it through, I just don't understand that. And again, where were you in 2018 when we slashed taxes by billions and trillions?
I love that point, Devin. I was gonna circle back to that before we ended, but that's awesome. I'm so thank you for just pulling that out of nowhere and bringing that up, because that says a lot, because you never see rich people complaining about tax breaks. They don't need them, but you never see them complaining about them.
You would never see that. So that's my rant on Dave Ramsey and stimulus checks. Let us know if you agree. Please put your thoughts and everything in the comments. Let us know what you think about that. So before we wrap up, before we go on a break, we're gonna do as we always do, a This Day in History. So your fact today is that on this day in history, the Negro National League was actually established. So for you baseball fans, on this day in 1920, Hall of Famer Andrew Rube Foster and his fellow team owners created the Negro National League with the slogan, "We are the ship, all else the sea." And so they pledged to start their own teams and play ball, and that they did. And so that's your fact for today. So on this day in 1920, the Negro National League was established back then. So take a second, rest, and we'll come back with some more news about COVID and some big news about Andrew Cuomo. So stick with us, and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. So we're going to get into COVID a little bit. It's still here with us, people. It has not gone away just yet. So we want to give you our COVID-19 update. The numbers are declining, but before we get to the numbers, we did want to let you know we did have some sad news this week, which was we had our first congressman to pass away from COVID. And so we wanted to report the passing of Representative Ron Wright of Texas from COVID-19. So we just want to make sure we give our condolences to his family, constituents, and his colleagues. Ron Wright did pass away from COVID-19. And so, so like I say, the numbers are declining, but we still have to be vigilant with our social distancing and mask wearing and all those things that you hate to do. We still have to continue to do them. And so yesterday, another day, 1.8 million tests. This is according to the COVID Tracking Project, 101,000 cases. 71,504 people are currently hospitalized. All of those numbers are down from the previous month. And so that's a good thing. That's what we wanted to see. And this is the 7-day average for cases has dropped below 100,000 for the first time since November 2nd. And the number of people currently hospitalized with COVID has decreased by nearly 15,000, and no states are reporting an increase by 10% or more. So very, 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 very good news there, Adrian. Finally, maybe seeing some light at the end of the tunnel. And if you're wondering total, throughout this entire pandemic, the United States has conducted 331 million tests. We've had about 27 million cases, about 72,000 hospitalized right now. And then deaths are nearing 500,000, which is mind-blowing. Right now, we have 470,986 people have passed away due to or related to COVID-19, which was unthinkable last year in March when we first went on lockdowns. And so just to, there are some ways you can remember those people. One thing you can do, we found an interesting project in Los Angeles. It's called the Rose River Memorial, which will allow you to create a rose for a lost life during the pandemic. And so you can check out their website, which is Rose River Memorial, I believe, .com. Yes, so it's called roseriver.com. So if you go there, you can see it and maybe, pitch in and have a rose created for someone that passed away because of the virus. So, Adrian, like I say, it's sad to hear that we are nearing 500,000 people have passed away from this pandemic. It's sad, but the vaccine is here. And so there's some good news on that side too.
Yeah, Devin, that's the light at the end of the tunnel. That's our silver bullet, we hope. One of the things that we haven't talked as much about, just, I guess, to not create a sense of, fear. I guess we're kind of doing Donald Trump, whenever I say that now. We hadn't been talking about these variants a whole lot. And I guess we may need to pick up a little bit to start talking about that, to not be, like Trump. Because, these vaccines, yes, they're great. But because we had such a terrible response to the pandemic, we've, kind of shot ourselves in the foot with all these variants. And we got to see if the vaccines are really going to be strong to really prevent them. And so far, a lot of the research is showing that they are at least effective in preventing, some of the severe symptoms. So the good thing, Devin, is that, President Biden is really, really, really committed to being an actual president.
How about that?
I think that. Yeah, I think that's great. I think, right off the bat, that's something that we can all, feel a little bit of peace of mind, because we knew that Donald Trump was not going to make a plan to get 300, million Americans vaccinated. But, President Biden has said that the U.S., we will have that, done by the end of July. And basically what he's doing out of this is saying, with Moderna, with Pfizer, they're going to actually have to move up their dosage deadlines. A lot of their deadlines were pushed off later in the summer, but I guess, the Biden team and I don't know who else, but somebody talked to them and they're going to be putting out more vaccines sooner. So originally they were going to be putting out about 100 million doses at the end of June, but that's been moved up to the end of May. And they were going to be putting out an additional 200 million doses by the end of the summer, but that's now been moved up to the end of July. So yeah, Devin, by the end of July, we can potentially see about 300 million doses. So I hope that they're going to allow those to go to everyday people. I get that we need to vaccinate teachers and high risk and frontline healthcare workers, but in order for us to all go back to normal and all go back to a little bit of interacting in society, we need to make sure that everybody's vaccinated. Which is why, Devin, you see a lot of states like the one I'm in. I'm sure there's probably some in Texas where you are, in New York, even in Missouri. They're seeing a lot of openings of mass vaccination sites. Like here in LA, they've got the Disneyland and even Dodger Stadium, and they've turned those into vaccination sites. So no more roller coasters in baseball. You can go get you a shot now, Devin. The only bad thing, though, Devin, that 2 days ago, the Dodger Stadium did report they had to close because they have a shortage of vaccines. So I guess, Devin, July cannot come soon enough.
You're right. It can't. I mean, like, we're really nearing towards, finally maybe getting back to normal over the summer. At this rate, things are moving very, very quickly. I'm loving what the Biden administration is doing. I mean, if you thought the Trump administration did a great job on COVID, I don't know if you did that, but if you thought they did a great job, then the Biden team has definitely come in and just taken that to the 10th degree. They're doing a wonderful job. I'm glad they take it seriously. So that's really good to hear. And so even here, I know Cowboy Stadium in Arlington is being used as a mass vaccination site. I think they just opened another one in Dallas that can do like 10,000 people a day, which is insane. And so things are really starting to ramp up, which is great. So that's good. There is light at the end of the tunnel. We just gotta get through these next, 4 or 5 months, and we'll be finally this time we will get through this. And so the next thing we wanted to talk about was something that happened this week. Is that the story was published this month by I think this was a report released by the New York Attorney General, Letitia James. And so she suggested that the New York governor, Andrew Cuomo, everybody knows Andrew Cuomo. He's been all over TV, during the pandemic.
If you don't, you got to know him now.
Yes, you will. You absolutely will know him now. Probably a 2024 hopeful for the presidential race if Joe Biden doesn't run. And so his brother is Chris Cuomo on CNN, if you didn't know. That's his brother. And so during the pandemic, we saw a lot of Andrew Cuomo. He was doing a lot of press conferences every single day, being heralded by the the media for doing a great job and taking the pandemic seriously. Remember, they had that whole fight over the number of ventilators that he needed and everything. That was a big deal. But apparently, in a report by the New York Attorney General, she is suggesting that the Cuomo administration actually undercounted deaths among nursing home residents by as much as 50%. And so she reports that preliminary data suggests that many of those nursing home residents died from COVID-19 in hospitals after being transferred from their nursing home, which is not reflected in the published total data when it comes to nursing home residents. And so a top aide for the governor did apologize to Democratic lawmakers. He said the administration, I don't even know what this means, but they froze when they were asked about this in August of 20. What does that even mean? But they froze when they were asked about this in August. And then they also told lawmakers that they delayed the data because they were worried the information would be used against Cuomo and his administration by the Trump administration's Justice Department. The mayor of New York City, Bill de Blasio, said yesterday he called for a full accounting of the situation. And he said it's very troubling in a recent interview. And so New York State senators are calling for the governor to be stripped of his emergency powers, actually, in the wake of all this. So, Adrian, people loved Andrew Cuomo in the beginning of this pandemic. And so this is going to absolutely change the conversation as far as, one, if the numbers that we're seeing when it comes to COVID are correct. And then, two, our perception of Andrew Cuomo and being truthful when it comes to the pandemic.
Devin, this is one of those stories that it's almost harder to report on just because I liked Andrew Cuomo. I was like, he was a governor who really took this pandemic seriously from the beginning, at least on what you saw, on the press conferences from these reports here, as it's like, we can't